Monday, July 31st, 1972. As Claudy village in County Londonderry goes about its morning, in the hills above, a deadly mission is already underway. 3 car bombs are armed. With the turn of a clock hand, Claudy's fate is sealed. The 3 bombs are then driven in convoy into the tiny village. In the space of 15 minutes, the 3 bombs explode, devastating the centre of Claudy. The first explosion was on Main Street.
Catherine was cleaning the windows in front of the shop at the time. As I went to turn in the gateway, there was just no merciful bang. The next thing I knew, I was out in the middle of the street. I looked back and I saw Catherine lying on the footpath. She wasn't moving at all.
I went up the street and I saw the devastation of what the first bomb had done. As I was going up, I saw Dr. Deacon carrying Catherine down the street.
My father was busy dishing samples of brandy out to people who were in various states of shock. We were sort of sitting on the bonnet of this car, and at that point a friend came running out and he shouted something to my father about the car. My father says, "Run, get out of here, run."
Then the second bomb went off and I ran into the garage of the health centre, not knowing it. And when I got in there, it was all dark. I thought, this is it. It's there now.
There's different people like Davy Muller and people like that there who dropped their brush and shovels to try and help whoever they could help on their way. Unfortunately, they were the victims.
The only way you could identify him was safety pin on his overalls. There's nothing else there, hardly. This was a terrible sight. Terrible together. Never seen anything like it in life. It's all things you shouldn't have to see.
Everything that I knew was Claudy was gone. Walked past McLaughlin's chip shop, gone. Burke's shoe shop, gone. McLaughlin's pub shop, gone. Our shop, gone. The post office, gone. It was just a whole village. Basically, the heart ripped clean out of it.
9 people died in the Claudy bombing from both sides of the community. Elizabeth McElhenney, Catherine Aiken, Artie Hone, David Miller, Rose McLaughlin, James McClelland, William Temple, Joe McCuskey and Joseph Connolly. Claudy has never forgotten those killed in the bombing, but for many outside the village, that terrible day was buried by the rubble and chaos of July 1972, when the single worst month of the Troubles claimed almost 100 lives. That changed when renewed investigations put Claudy at the heart of a suspected cover-up involving the police, the state and the Catholic Church. We explore why Claudy remains an open wound and why there are serious questions about a key suspect. But why was a village like Claudy a target for this kind of attack? On the morning of the Claudy bombing, thousands of soldiers regained control of nationalist no-go areas in Derry in what was known as Operation Motorman. One theory is that Republicans intended the Claudy attack to draw attention away from Derry City. Although the IRA quickly issued a denial, it is widely believed members from South Derry were involved in the Claudy bombing. Martin McGuinness was second in command of the IRA in Derry City at the time. He has always maintained they were not involved. No group has ever officially claimed responsibility for the atrocity. Police resources were stretched, but the investigation yielded some initial success. The police were able to gather information on the suspected bombers and where the bombs were built. The focus moved to South Derry. It was on a laneway off this road here in the townland of Craigavole near Swatra that the bombs destined for Claudy were constructed. 9 men are suspected of being involved in the Cloddy bombing. The homemade explosives were stored in a farmyard, packed into milk churns filled with shrapnel to cause maximum harm, then loaded into stolen cars. After leaving the bombs in Cloddy, the gang tried to ring through a warning, but they couldn't find a working phone. In a panic, they told a Dungiven shopkeeper to warn police, but it was too late. This gave the police what seemed like a crucial break. The description of the car the gang were driving here in Dungiven led police to a man who would become a key suspect. He was arrested but then released because he had what appeared to be a rock-solid alibi. He said he was with his wife and a priest, Father James Chesney. The priest backed up the suspect's story. But soon the priest himself was being linked to the bombing. Those who knew Father Chesney, a flamboyant and charismatic man, say he never hid his Republican sympathies. But police intelligence suggested Father Chesney did more than provide an alibi. I met the former Special Branch officer who gathered much of the intelligence on Father Chesney. He said it was graded as B2 level, meaning very reliable and probably true.
My informant was very reliable. He was a member of the South Derry Brigade of the area, and he gave me invaluable information which saved lives. We didn't listen to gossip. We were specially trained on how to do it, and it was great. And I am quite satisfied that it was very accurate that he was involved.
Many Republicans say such intelligence can't be trusted, but senior Republicans in South Derry have also told us Father Chesney was a member of the IRA. This is the parochial house where Father Chesney lived when he served here in the parish of Cullen near Desert Martin. We've learned that during that time he allowed this house to be used by IRA men. And we've talked to one former South Derry IRA man who learned how to make fire bombs in the priest's home.
First met Father Chesney in 1971 in Cullen. His house was a safe house for on the runs. It was the safest house in the parish. You could say it was the HQ at the time. That's where we all gathered to talk about operations. So I remember one night working with Durexes, testing my acid to see how long it took the acid to burn through. We used them on incendiary devices, you know, fire bombs. The acid would burn through and then drop onto a mixture of stuff. And we were timing how long it took the acid to burn through. Now if you wanted a longer time, you just put one condom inside the other, and that would give you double the time to get away. And Father Chesney was there watching too. He never touched anything or took part in it, and he just watched. He never really wanted to get his hands dirty. Now when I hear some people saying he wasn't in the IRA, it really angers me, because there was a lot of people around here knows he was.
Weeks before the Cloddy bombing, Father Chesney moved to the parish of Balahi. Shortly after the bombing, new intelligence came to the police about Father Chesney. It suggested weapons were being stored in the Balahi parochial house. The Special Branch officer we spoke to was about to raid the house when his boss put a stop to it at the last minute. He said the matter was in hand, the matter was being dealt with.
If the operation had been sanctioned, I would have went to the parochial house, accompanied by police and army, and searched the premises if there had been weapons found. Anybody who was in the house would have been arrested, including Father Chesney. Searched the premises if there had been weapons found. Anybody who was in the house would have been arrested, including Father Chesney.
Soon after that, police intelligence indicates that Father Chesney helped his friend and key Cloddy suspect once again, this time to evade arrest in a separate operation. The man later left the country. We now know how the RUC handled the matter of Father Chesney. The Police Ombudsman's report, published in August, revealed that although a senior officer described him as a dangerous priest, he did not act to arrest him. Instead, the RUC wanted him moved. The senior officer wrote to the Northern Ireland office asking them to intervene and enlist the help of the Catholic Church. William Whitelaw, then Secretary of State, raised the issue of Father Chesney in a meeting with Cardinal Conway, head of the Catholic Church, in December 1972. The Cardinal recorded the meeting in his diaries. Cardinal Conway was disturbed by what William Whitelaw had to say about Father Chesney, and he promised to look into it.
2 months later, William Whitelaw and his wife come to visit the Cardinal in his own house on a Sunday afternoon, and this is the section that is quoted by the Ombudsman in his final report. I began by referring to a certain person about whom he had spoken to me, and then he goes on to say that he had spoken to the superior of Father Chesney, who had challenged him, and he had strenuously denied the challenge. The most he was prepared to admit was that he was sympathetic to the Republican movement. He may have transported some people, but that was all he'd ever been involved in. About what the church
After the bombing, Father Chesney moved to Donegal.
Cardinal Conway records all of that and shares that with William Whitelaw. The superior, that would have probably been the Bishop of Derry at the time, Bishop Farron, had given him orders to stay where he was on sick leave until further notice. So he, the Secretary of State, seemed to be pleased with this.
Father Chesney stayed in Donegal until his death in 1980. He was never questioned about the Claudy bombing. He took whatever information he had to his grave. Because of his link to Father Chesney, one person has remained a suspect. He's the man the priest provided an alibi for, and the police believed it was his car that was used in the unsuccessful attempt to phone through a warning. The police ombudsman has referred to him simply as Man A. Now many of the Claudy families believe Man A may be their last chance to get to the truth.
He just disappeared then, and that was it. No one followed up or arrested or anything else after that.
I want them to go and do something about Manny.
But would it ever be possible to hear Man A's own account of what role he might have played in Claudy? His name is known to many of the Claudy families, but not his whereabouts. After 40 years, many of the relatives believe he'll never be found. But we began to piece together what's known about him, to try to trace him. Immediately after leaving Northern Ireland, he moved to America, where he was later joined by his wife and child. We found out he'd moved around. He lived first in New York, then Alaska. He then travelled south to Portland, Oregon, and finally to San Francisco. At some point, he and his wife separated and she returned to Northern Ireland. But what did Man A do then? Finally, we had a breakthrough and found his last known address in America. It seemed he hadn't lived there for some time, and our trail went cold. But then we made a startling discovery. He was closer to home than anyone had expected. After tracking Man A right across America, this is where our search has finally ended, back here in Ireland. We went to his door to ask him about Claudy and what's said about Man A in the Ombudsman's report. We have no evidence against him other than the intelligence referred to in the Ombudsman's report, so we're not naming him or showing his face. It has been suggested, and you're the person that's been identified as Man A in that report.
Me?
Yes.
What was that, man? Oh, well, I didn't mind it. I was picked up for a while, for a couple of days.
Right.
But that's all true.
Yeah. Picked up and released again?
Yeah.
Yeah. So your name was mentioned because of the fact that you were arrested at the time?
Yeah, it was thousands of others.
Yeah.
And they were throwing them into a long case after me like door.
Yeah. But were you not arrested specifically though about Claudy?
I don't know what I was picked up for.
Yeah. Well, did they ask you about Claudy when they had you in?
They did, of course.
Yeah.
That's everything.
And were you able to tell them anything then, or?
I didn't know that much. Only when I heard that she was everybody else.
Police were drawn to Man A because of his car. It was the same make and colour as the one driven by the bombers when they tried to issue a warning in Dungiven. Can you remember what car you had back in 1972?
Well, for work we don't know how to do that. These things. And the car which he used like that was sitting home was a Volkswagen.
Right. Volkswagen.
Cashback.
Was it an orange Volkswagen?
Yeah.
Right. What does it make of it, is it?
Volkswagen.
Right. Yeah.
And seemed they saw an orange vehicle, and I guess that the guy's only one in an orange car.
And that's why they...
Well, I don't know. It seems that's what they think. Nobody in an orange car with me.
And is that what they suggested to you then whenever they questioned you back
There
then?
was an orange car seen and
We also asked him about Father Chesney and that alibi. And did you tell them then that you were, on the morning of Claudia, that you were along with Father Chesney in his parochial house?
Well, they might have been. I might have been. So, Father Chesney was a neighbour of ours.
Right. Yeah.
I don't remember, that's 40 years ago.
Yeah. There's another little bit here where it refers to Man A again. It says that police assessed that Man A's alibi had been prepared in advance and that Father Chesney was involved in the bombing of Claudia.
Had it been prepared in advance, so we would have done.
Yeah.
We didn't expect it to be going through this kind of. We definitely get something to do with it, not do it.
But what did he have to say about the Claudia bombing?
After these police forces were never there, after you anything what they're talking about, talk, look around Claudia. My friend you were looking for. You know one this morning. I'll take us up with manacles over there.
You think then that the people responsible for Claudia are in Claudia? People who planted those bombs live around Claudia?
Somebody, why would an outsider go into another area? That's not the way it's done.
So was somebody local then you feel that was responsible?
If I was looking at it,
He said the bombing didn't make any sense and he couldn't understand why 3 bombs were left in different parts of Claudia.
I'm not telling you, young people know that if you put a bomb up here, people run around away from that, run into this one, they run away from that, they run into another one. Somebody didn't know what they're doing.
And in terms of...
And then they got them in Father Chesney. Father Chesney is smarter than that.
Yeah.
So he'd be doing over in Claudia. Nobody doesn't have.
So you don't think Father Chesney was involved at all?
I don't think so.
Did you know him well?
Very well.
In this document here, they say that there was intelligence at the time to say that Father Chesney was the director of operations in the IRA in South Derry. Do you believe that?
Yeah. Oh, chaps. Where's these people? They're the Mars or...
And as far as you're concerned then, you have no questions to answer about what happened in Claudia and your conscience is clear?
My conscience is clear. Nobody from that or said that man had anything to do with that. And I don't know why they're focusing on it. Just the whole thing doesn't make sense. You know yourself.
Man A insists he's innocent, while the police still regard him as a suspect. He's not been questioned since 1972. In 2002, 30 years after the Claudia bombing, the dormant investigation took a significant turn. The police carried out a routine review of the original RUC investigation, but what they found was anything but routine.
From my perspective, it was clear that there were opportunities to arrest and interview suspects in 1972 that weren't taken. I have made it clear to the families, and they are content at this stage, that we do have a lot more knowledge than we had before. And it will be our intention to try and see and develop if there's lines of inquiry and evidence that we can act on in relation to the people who are involved. But I'm not going to talk publicly in terms of who did what on the day in question on the 31st of July, 72.
Then in 2005, 4 people were arrested, including then Sinn Féin Assembly member Francie Brawley.
My first memory of it was two big policemen standing in the kitchen, standing in the living room, and telling me that they were arresting me for questioning about the death of 9 people in Cloddy. It was absolute shock, you know, absolute shock. I don't know if anything could ever happen to me as bad again. They told me everything they knew about Cloddy, you know. I mean, they told me, they named names. They told me where the bombs were made. They told me how they were transported. They named the people who were transported in. Wanted to know if I knew them. They named Father Chesney. They asked me if I knew Father Chesney, which I did. Not very well, but I knew him for a long time.
But after 2 days, Francie Brawley was released without charge, along with the other 3 people.
If anybody needed somebody to come out and say, we bombed Cloddy, I do. As long as, you know, nobody owns up to it, or nobody is discovered as having perpetrated the Cloddy bombing, then people like me are going to be sort of the no smoke without fire, or no fire without smoke people, you know.
The police investigation closed in 2006 with no new results, bringing more disappointment for the Cloddy families. But we can reveal that in that same year, key suspect Man A returned to Ireland, living openly in the Republic.
I was gone in here. I was in Ireland for the 5 years.
Oh, were you?
Yeah, I just came back with it.
And he even once returned to Northern Ireland.
The brother died there. I was up at the funeral. And I was going to take the book. Not paying over it. I don't know anybody there now.
It appears that another opportunity to question this man had been missed. With August publication of the Police Ombudsman's report, the families hoped they might learn something new. But after an 8-year investigation, the report brought them more frustration. The Ombudsman focused on the collusion between the RUC and the government and its contact with the Catholic Church. A lot of the families expressed some disappointment with your findings and were left pretty frustrated because a lot of them had known much of the detail that you produced and put in the public domain.
Well, I acknowledge that frustration, and I share it, as a matter of fact. But I'll make the point also that the remit of our office is very narrow and it deals only with the police. We're not a Savile report. We're not a Bill of Rights inquiry. We don't have that remit, and we don't have the resources to do that. So it's a very narrow remit, and I can understand the frustrations of the families in what we've delivered.
One new piece of information did emerge after the Ombudsman's report was published. In 2002, Martin McGuinness told Spotlight in a statement that he had never met Father James Chesney. But in September, he remembered that he had talked to the priest on his deathbed.
I never knew Father Chesney before Cloddy. I never knew Father Chesney for many years after the Cloddy bomb. I was asked, whenever I was told that Father Chesney was dying, I was told he was a Republican sympathiser, would I go to see him and meet with him in County Donegal. I did that. There was no mention whatsoever of the Cloddy bomb. And during the course of that, he just talked about his support for a united Ireland and for Irish freedom.
Some of the Cloddy families believed Martin McGuinness could tell them more about the bombing.
He was the leader of the IRA in Londonderry at that time. And don't tell me that he didn't know what was happening out in his surrounding county.
Martin McGuinness, by his own words, said he was on the run at that time. Where was he? And I got up with him, he should have been questioned. And it wasn't. To this day, I haven't been questioned about it, at least.
But we can reveal that police did consider questioning Martin McGuinness about Cloddy in 2005. However, it was decided that there was insufficient evidence to warrant an arrest. That note remains in the Cloddy file today. The senior officer who made that decision has since retired, but we've been told the officer alone took that decision and there was no political interference. However, Martin McGuinness could soon be questioned by the Cloddy families if a private meeting goes ahead.
I actually had a phone call from Martin McGuinness. We talked on the phone for quite a while. Not just about Cloddy, but just general. He seemed very willing to talk about Claudia with ourselves. You know, obviously, if that does happen, it'll be a private meeting, away from the glare of the press and anybody else for that matter.
Will you meet him?
Yes, I would. Yes, I would. Because I would like him to explain, not only to me, but to everyone else in Claudia, what exactly this was all about and how it was all organised and why it was organised. Because I do believe that he has got a lot of answers.
I wouldn't meet Martin McGuinness if he was gold-plated for the same rules. No, I wouldn't meet him. Because I know he wouldn't tell the truth.
We asked Martin McGuinness for an interview for this programme. However, he told us he didn't want to comment publicly on this issue any further because he's engaged in a process which may result in a meeting with the Claudia families.
11th of January, darling Catherine, 23rd birthday. We go over then to the July, which is the date of the Claudia ball.
As the families are left with their memories and their search for answers, the police have begun a fresh investigation. Last week, a detective travelled to America to question a suspect who was detained by the FBI. But will key suspect Man A talk to the police?
So what would you like to see happen now then, do you think, out of all of this?
I'd like to see the people who done it own up to it. Official live.
And would you be happy to talk to the police if they wanted to talk to you about it?
I'm not the police anymore. I don't trust police up there.
We've learned that the PSNI have recently interviewed Man A's former wife for a second time, but as yet they haven't questioned him. The investigation has been transferred from the Historical Inquiries team to the PSNI Serious Crime Branch, which the police say is best placed to deal with this large and complex case. Much of what is known publicly about the Claudia bombers is based on police intelligence. The investigation was allowed to go cold 38 years ago, but the hard facts are 9 people were killed and no one has been held responsible. For the families, the best chance of a resolution now lies in a change of heart from the same people who brought death and destruction. For them, the starting point is that Man A, singled out in the police ombudsman's report, needs to be questioned again now.
If they know so much about this Man A, you know, I want them to go and interview the man now.
What was the evidence at the time when they actually interviewed Mr. A? Why did they interview him? What evidence did they have? I don't think enough was done for Claudia.
Do you think the Claudia bombers who are still living will ever be caught?
It's a very hard question to answer. Unless something is prepared to go forward, be an on about it, tell the truth.
Had always denied any part in the Claudia bombings, but it's now widely accepted the provisionals were involved. The South Derry Brigade unleashing its response to Operation Motorman. But word soon spread that Father James Chesney, who was a curate at Cullion near the village of Desert Martin, may have been a part of that IRA unit.
We were told by a customer of ours, a Catholic customer, that a priest was involved in the bombing of Claudia, and that day we couldn't believe that a priest that would be in the pulpit preaching to others to do right and maybe taking confessions from people would be involved in something like that.
I couldn't believe it at the beginning, you know. I said, no, man of God wouldn't do anything like that, surely. But as time went on, it came out that he was involved in it, very heavily involved in it.
Surprisingly, Chesney was never questioned over Claudia. He was transferred to Donegal and stayed in the Republic until his death in 1980. For almost 30 years, the trail went cold, Then, in 2002, came the breakthrough the families had been waiting for. First, this letter was sent to bomb survivor Mary Hamilton. The writer, calling himself Father Liam, claimed Chesney confessed to him in 1972. The church questioned its credibility, pointing out that Father Liam referred to John rather than James Chesney. Then a new police investigation revealed a parish priest in South Derry was a member of the IRA and was actively involved in terrorism. Chesney wasn't named, but that's who police were talking about. And that wasn't all. Documents revealed the then Secretary of State William Whitelaw and the head of the Catholic Church Cardinal William Conway discussed the Cloddy bombings and Chesney's activities.
The Secretary of State gave the Cardinal a full account of his disgust at the priest's behaviour, and the letter also indicates that the Cardinal knew that the priest was behaving improperly. The letter then states that the Cardinal mentioned the possibility of transferring the priest to Donegal.
Tomorrow the Police Ombudsman will publish his long-awaited report. It will primarily deal with how police at the time dealt with their suspicions about Chesney, but we understand the investigation will shed new light on whether the authorities protected Chesney.
If David Cameron, the Prime Minister, could apologise in the House of Commons to the Bloody Sunday families, I think he could apologise to the Cloddy families. But I think there's more than David Cameron has to apologise. I think the Church and the Provisional IRA should apologise for what was an awful atrocity among other atrocities, but this one appears to have had a bombing priest at the centre of it.
It's a total disgrace. Democratic society is supposed to live in. You can't even be told the truth.
I would like them to own up and tell it. Why did they cover up all for a Catholic priest?
38 years on, no one has yet been charged, let alone convicted, and families are resolute that justice must be done and the full truth must be known. Sharon O'Neill, UTV Live Tonight.